I have the name of 3 individuals whose opinions I really care about. And I carry around this little piece of paper in my wallet. If any actions that I take do not affect those 3 individuals, I really don't give a fuck what anybody else thinks.
3, 2, 1. Woo! Good day. Welcome, y'all, to the Curious Observer podcast, exploring thoughts with Miss B. And a couple words I thought I'd share, and I'm excited to unpack further. Social worker, advocate for justice, host of the Be Yourself podcast, which I had the honor of being invited into her podcast.
You.
And the title is called Puro Good Vibes. And that was so fun. And before we talk more on that, artist, if I may add, superb artist in the of spoken word poetry. And this is how we met right here. Leading a community of artists, poets in Laredo. And the way we met was through the virtual. The organization's called Laredo Border Slam. Shout out to Laredo. Mm-hmm. And hey, you're famous up here in San Antonio. There's a poet, there's a slam here, or a performance rather, and I attended to watch. It was the Poodle Slam.
Yes.
Yes. I mentioned the Laredo Border Slam, and I mentioned her name. All of them were like, "Oh yeah, Miss B." I'm like, "Wow, look at that! Oh my goodness!" And welcome.
It's one big community, one big family. I'm glad that you did join them.
Yes, and I look forward for further expressions outside from the grapevine, which I would say I consider myself birthed through the Laredo Border Slam, amongst the sea of webs of individuals called communities. Yeah. I'll just ask this to get started, to tee it out. How'd you get started?
In slam?
Sure, let's do that.
So one day a long time ago, back in like my undergrad years, this was a long time ago.
What is time, right? Let's
what is time?
Let's untangle that. What is time? So much can we get so wrapped into the idea that we can watch within the flesh as like, oh, I remember when I was a kid, and at the same time, it's like, well, of course, we could even go further. We could all remember when we like transformed from a child into the puberty stage, or like a whole other human being, but you're that same person. So it's like, we're still that same person. And, all we're doing is just, we're just navigating along the journey. I know I'm ranting here, but, So along the journey, right?
Yeah, along the journey. And it's interesting that like you bring it up as to like, what is time? I'm a huge social work nerd. So I study a lot development and human development. And so when I was in my 20s, I was very rebellious. And so I engaged with like a lot of partying, bar hopping, and that's how I got
introduced. Where's the vibe bound?
Yes. And that's how I got introduced to musicians. And so I got into that scene, but I was never a musician myself. Like I just knew that I liked art and I liked poetry, but I wasn't a musician, but I liked performing. Okay. And so I used to host open mics, and I was like the only poet in open mics.
So are you saying that you were doing poetry and then you started to hang out with musicians, or you weren't?
I started hanging out with musicians first, then started hosting open mics so I could continue hanging out with.
That fork right there, when that happened, musicians and pop. I mean, I'm sure there's many people out there who hang out with musicians and don't happen to find themselves opening up mics. So right there, if I may pause you there, what series of thoughts, if you may recall, just generated, like, you know what, I'm opening mics. Like, what does that mean?
I have huge respect for the performance art. And I have huge respect for those that have the guts to get up on a stage.
And if I may pause you right
And
there, anyone
mhm.
listening, you're probably wondering, okay, who's Miss B? So when I see Miss B, everything she just said, I described her. I have so much respect for Miss B, and the way, I consider Miss B my mentor and writing, and just seeking inspiration, and the continuing crafting of spoken word. And I didn't recognize that. I didn't know that that could be a thing until I saw an ad, or rather a promotion through a Facebook, that there's going to be virtual slam. And that's how we met. And little did I know that you were the same circle of friends that I grew up with in the music scene, where I would consider myself. That's where I started to uh, gain a footing of what it means to be a musician. And it's so cool to find that intersection, and watching you lead the community, the vibe, the tribe, the vibe tribe, shall we? The vibe tribe,
Yeah.
the Puro vibe tribe. And it's very clear the amount of experience this woman has. And she's done a lot of competitions. I can't even imagine what that looks like, because I've done music, and word is like, whoa, it's a whole other arena, and that's your space. And so I just had to insert that, for anyone viewing. uh,
Do
where I
you
want to be
feel that
go
you
for it.
get the same rush though, like out of music and poetry?
It's to me, I would describe it the same. Like, it's the zone that I would. Some my friends have told me this, and I would say I would agree. And this is what they say, when you play, when they talk about me playing my sax and soloing, whatever the context is. I feel like I could listen. It sounds like I'm listening to you talk, and I'm like, wow, that's such a trip to hear that. And I think that's a good space to be. And I've heard the other same analysis of my speaking. It's like, when you speak, it feels like you're playing your sax, like you're trying to figure
Mm.
things out. And I'm like, yeah, it's like, I would describe it the same way. You see what I mean? Like, that's the kind of question someone with that kind of experience would ask. You know what I mean?
But like that's definitely a gift that people could hear you through your music. Not many people could say that. And we talked about this, how Erica J told you that she had heard like a
Yes.
specific, and I'm like, that's freaking amazing that like a little piece of music, not words, just music, rhythm, spoke to someone.
Yeah.
And I'm
So
like,
Erica
that's
J, for anyone listening, is a
shout out.
participant amongst many in the Laredo Border Slam. Shout out to Laredo once again. And there was a mentioning of a song that I played with. Shout out to Santo Vicio, Laredo. And uh, there's a song that we did. It was it's coming from it's a jazz number. Ala Moldau, Dexter Gordon. Anyone who's a jazzer, or interested, type in Dexter Gordon, letter A, LA, Moldau. Uh, and that's the original. And Santa Vicio did like a psychedelic reggae funk version of that. And ba-do-ba-bo-dum, ba-do-ba-do-ba-dee-doo-dum. And I found it striking that an audience, someone from afar, could to this day recall it. That's what Miss B is
Mm-hmm.
referencing. And you were saying, sorry, the parallel.
Yeah, that section, the music, the rhythm spoke to someone, not
Mhm.
words, but it spoke to someone. And I think that that's just a gift. And that's a gift that I saw in musicians. And I wanted to be a part of that, but it was weird because it's like, I'm not a musician. I know I'm not a musician. I know that I'm not a singer. How do I get into this connection, this tribe, if you will, of
Yes.
artists?
So you
Um,
recognize that there's something, is like, as much as I'm inside this circle, like, let's put it right here, right? Visually, this is musicians, but what encompasses that above that hierarching umbrella, if that's an appropriate word, what umbrellas over that is just the idea of artist. And artist encompasses not just music, but acting, poetry, yeah,
Right.
you name it, anything along the lines of creation. Would you say?
Right. Right. Because before that, I did acting, but I did acting in high school. Now I'm in my 20s, and it's like, okay, well, we're not in high school anymore, but I'm hanging out with all these
Oh,
musicians.
hold up! You said acting, so you were acting before? What?
Hmm.
Okay, so how do you feel acting played the role of nudging of like, well, it's along the lines of what I'm familiar, and I could kind of channel that tool. How would you unpack that?
Because with performance art, you're not just going to read words, you're going to shout words. You're going to show emotion in the words. Because if you want your audience to feel it, then you better show the emotion to the words. And I'm a huge believer in not faking it. I don't fake it. Um, so with acting, I needed to get into the role in order to not fake my emotions. With poetry, I don't need to get into any role. It's me. And so the emotions are going to be there.
It's more
Yeah,
present.
it's more present and it's more real. So when I did the whole open mic thing, and then um, I graduated, and then I became a career woman. And I stopped doing open mics. I stopped going to shows. And then I walked into Cuadro once, and Chibi
Quadro
Orduña,
Cafe, Chibi.
yes,
Yes, yes.
was
By the way, rest in peace. That restaurant or bar. That
yes,
certainly was my first gig. It was there.
really,
Yes, it was ever. It was there. Shout out to David Montoya, Oscar Moreno. We're doing a little side project right now in Laredo with McVinny vibes and. Let's see, Alex Curry is a rapper, Justin White,
Mm.
Javi on trumpet, and yeah, so stay tuned on that. But yet, it's funny to see that the full circle of that was about 10 years ago for me. But sorry, I interrupted. Quadro Cafe,
Yeah.
Chibi, which also happened to be the first live poet I ever saw at Quadro. So it's just
Mm-hmm.
so crazy to see this membrane of artists that sustains itself through the knowing of committing into the crafting of. That sounds weird, right?
Yes, but it was all there. It was just a matter of it being molded.
Yeah.
You know, like the parts were there. You were there. I didn't know you were there, but you were there. You were around, and that's what's so beautiful about the Laredo art scene is that like we're a community that don't even know we're a community.
Oh man.
It's not until later that it's like, oh, you were at that show. It's like, yeah, I performed at that show. You know. So yeah, I walked into Cuadro. Chibi was doing performance poetry. He's the one that created Laredo Border Slam, and that's how I got started.
And we gotta do some unpacking for Chibi. Shout out to Chibi
Shout out,
Orduña.
yeah.
He's I got to know Chibi because of his sister Julia, and I got to meet Julia specifically because of Baber Beatty.
Barbara Beatty.
Baber Beatty is how I got involved into the Laredo music scene with Santo Vicio, and it's really cool to see. Rest in peace, Pinche Bob. Pinche Bob, rest in peace.
I have him right here.
Is that right? Ooh, y'all. Right now, if you're looking at that, type in hashtag Galactic Frontera, just like that.
Galactic Frontera, Pinche Bob.
Yes, yes, and just to tie that, with the tie all of that into what you were saying with, and we can unpack that further along the way. With Chibi, Chibi is a just phenomenal, just sharp-witted individual. Who you're welcome to share more. That's everything what I say. I wish to get to know him more. Yeah, I wish to get to know him more. That's the extent of how I know him. I'd like to give him more. I don't want to take away his thunder. How would you describe Chibi?
I mean, I think he's a genius. He's an artistic genius. I've heard him sing. I've seen him act.
Yeah.
I've seen him perform poetry. So it's just, I've seen him do makeup. He taught me how to do makeup.
He's so hashtag extra, man.
He is hashtag extra for sure. But I joked with him last time that it's like, we have careers because of you. And I'm like, but you know what? In all reality, we do, because a lot of the people that started off in Laredo Border Slam either went into the route of advocacy because they wanted not only their voice to be heard, but the voice of others.
Because they recognized that they could craft their tongue that otherwise would not have been able to transmute their ideas, that perhaps could even, maybe it's like how would they feel, but they see it in others. So, and they don't know how to craft their tongue that to amplify such voice. So it's like, I can translate what I see because I've seen it myself. It takes one to know one kind of thing. So it's like, boom, I could see that. And as you were saying.
Yeah. My brother actually went into radio. Well, started performing at Laredo Border Slam, went into radio, and then studied communications, and now he's doing all of that.
Right?
Yes, Eli.
By the way, sharp man, also younger brother, right?
He is my younger brother. Yes.
Yes.
But same thing, like it started off with being on stage that set that fire.
Yes.
So I joke with Chibi and tell him we owe you our careers, but we kind of do sometimes if you really think about it. Being on stage set us like this fire to want to do more with our lives. And I think a lot of us have accomplished that already.
Well, I certainly, I feel that personally, and it's so cool to be able to trace that to an individual who's within, family and friends vibe. And it's, shout out to Chibi once again. I wouldn't be writing so much if it wasn't for the Laredo Border Slam. And, now it's in the nudging oneself to flow out a thought and try to like understand, and especially in today's times, and trying to make sense of what's going on. It's like, well, there's a lot of weird things and I don't know how to explain it. So how about I just like, try to make sense of it here and let's see what happens. What do you see? Hey, what do you see? Oh, you see all that? Well, what if, and that's what I was kind of like stumbling. What if I try to clear it up more? Could we all see more? What do you see? And it's just become this snowball effect of well, poetry. Would you describe it as a mutual experiencing?
Yes. And it's important to see it in that way, because one thing that I always tell youth poets is, if you think, am I allowed to cuss? I don't know if I'm allowed to cuss.
Oh, do what you want. This is just we're exploring thoughts, and that's what this is.
Okay.
Wherever the tunnels are, cussing certainly cuts through. And if that's where we need to go, then let's fucking cut through.
Okay. I usually tell youth poets, if you think your shit's not worth reading, you need to consider that someone in the audience is going through the exact same thing that you're going through. And so maybe they needed to hear it. And so when you suffer of things such as anxiety and depression, it's important to know that you're not alone. And so when you read something and you want to know someone else's opinion on it, because maybe they've gone through something similar, it's important to know that you have someone there with you at a time that you feel alone. And I think that's why I love the virtual open mics so much right now, because at a time where we literally feel alone because we're not allowed to go out or do anything, we've built a virtual community. Oh, yeah. And
by the way, how many places have tuned in? It's really cool to see. I can only imagine through your eyes, leading the front, and it's like, oh, let's just put this link, and oh, UK's coming in, or all these other states are coming in. Like, how would you describe that experience watching it take its shape?
I mean, it makes me feel so happy whenever we get someone from we got someone from the UK last time, was it?
Yes, yes.
Yeah, like I mean, that means that we're connecting with people not even next door. You know what I mean? And that means that our voice is universal. That there's always going to be someone out there that has a voice or has something similar experience, and they're able to share and they're able to connect, and that connection is amazing to me.
How would you describe empathy?
Hmm.
Especially from coming from the context and the layout of the conversation that has unfolded. How how would you further paint that?
So sorry, my mouth was getting dry.
It's all good.
So I often, when it comes to poetry, I always try to write what's real to me. I never try to write somebody else's story. I've probably only done it once, and it was a therapeutic thing that I
Exercise.
needed to do for me. Yes, it was a therapeutic exercise that I needed to do for me. Um, because I cannot share somebody else's story. That's not my story. Um, but I could listen to someone else's story and I could be there for them. And sometimes that's what empathy needs to be, is to listen, not make it about you, not have to say like, I know exactly what you're going through, because you don't have to. You just
Mhm.
need to listen and feel what the other person
Witness
is
from your
saying.
shoes what they're making available to be seen.
Right. And
It's
that's
like,
what
I
empathy
see it.
is. And sometimes we always have to take for consideration what another person has gone through.
Mm.
And we always have to take for consideration that every person is doing the best that they can with what they've got. And so the beauty with social work and poetry, and how I've found that connection, is that I'm able to hear people. I'm able to listen to different stories,
Mhm.
appreciate them, be there for them, be there for poets, be there, to listen to their story. But then when I go into coach mode, when it comes to
Mm.
poetry, that's where I'm like, no, do not write something that you've never gone through, because you have no right to tell that story. But yeah.
Yeah, so you know how to, because of you've recognized lanes of thought. And what
Mhm.
you know what, let me ask you this, I, what was it like for you when it was all blur, if you know what I mean? Like anyone that this is how I would describe it for me. Like it's so crazy for me that I kind of feel a familiarity with writing, but it's certainly not that long ago that I could remember clearly how much of a blur it felt like writing was jumping into the ocean. It's like, let's see what happens. And it's like that literally gives me no reference. So how would you describe when things were such a blur in writing to the point where it's just flow?
Mm, I mean, I have a poetry book that I was writing on when I was in the seventh grade.
So
So
that blur was that it's over there.
yeah, yeah. So like, I can't even really call it a blur, because I could literally like find it in 5 seconds and open it up. So I can't really call it a blur, because it's there, it's still there. It's not good poetry. I mean, I wouldn't consider it good poetry. But it's
But
there.
because
It's what
it's
I was
captured,
feeling at
it's
the time.
clear.
Yes, it was
Oh.
captured at the time. It's what I was feeling at the time.
Mm.
Um, but I can say this: when it comes to competitive poetry, there was a time where I was invested a lot in the competition of it, and I can't remember shit of what I wrote during that time.
Oh, but then maybe that's a fun to space to explore. Why do you suppose that is?
I just don't think I was probably really feeling anything. I think it was just I wanted to write, to perform, and to win.
Hey, how would you
Yeah.
describe the like in
Now
the
it's
technique?
Now it's liberating because I don't see it as that anymore. Now, I mean, I thankfully, and I'm so grateful that I've been through what I've been through when it comes to poetry. And like, I mean, I'm not trying to like, say that
No,
I'm the shit or
you're just
anything.
describing. You're just describing.
Yeah, like I've been in competitions where I've been first. I've been in competitions where I've been like seventh out of 43 poets. And I've been in competitions where I've been the 43rd poet out of those 43 poets, So I've been in competitions where I've been like up high and really lowest score ever. To me, now it's just like, you know what? I think I'm just going to write because I want to write, and I'm going to compete just because it's fun.
And whatever rises shall.
Yeah. The importance is that I perform it and I leave it on the stage. And now I feel like I've gotten the best poetry out of that.
Wow. Well, there's something that triggered a thought that triggered. Let's spin the wheel here. Let's see what do you think of this? All of that made me think about a particular spot, or rather, at the end of your poem of Superhero. By the way, oh my gosh! Anyone who has not listened to Miss B deliver Superhero, go type in. I'll put a link there. Anything else that you'd like for me to add in terms of your poetry, I'll be sure to add it below. And certainly this one. At the end, you mentioned, when I was 6 years old, I think that was the phrase.
Yeah.
Little girls would dress and play with dolls. I wear a cape.
Mm-hmm.
And what I want to draw from that is the spectrum of the element of time, and I want to see what comes to mind, especially from that little girl wearing a cape, and the intentions and the vision, the forecast, the wonder into 2020, the wonders of the roaring 20s. With this poem, if I may share, I wrote on the 6th of December, 12:25 a.m. It was this Sunday, and I welcome what comes to mind. So here we go. What is the difference between looking at the time and looking through time? Through a paradigm, what is invisible yet notable? Oh, does it shine? Apparently, it, as in time, does it seem seen only through the human eye? What could be within such dream that is sustained inside our mind? What are we witnessing across time with our real eye? Miss B, what comes to mind?
Well, first of all, and I don't know if it's because we're on your podcast, but you sound so confident saying that than when you're doing the virtual open mics. It seems like when we're doing the virtual open mics, you have to take a pause and explain yourself. It's like, no, go through the poem. So that sounded beautiful. It sounded beautiful that you said it clearly, you said it through. That just sounded beautiful.
Mm-hmm. You're just saying it for the standpoint of looking at it versus, hey, look at my words.
Yeah. Well, and because it comes out so much more clearer. I think that when you pause and you like, okay, well, let me explain what I just said a little bit before I continue with the poem. It throws me off. And so I'm like, wait, okay, I forget where I was in the poem. If you and then right now when you just said it through, it all made perfect sense. I think especially right now, I mean, we've been closed to the world for how long now? It's almost going to be a year. But what is time?
What is time? And it's perhaps that's the great awakening of like, so much have we been confined by the looking at time. And what comes to mind for me is looking at time is like, I've always scratched off the calendar, but something unique about since the lockdown and writing and looking at the the scratching off the calendar. It's like, what am I really looking at here? We're not looking at a calendar. This is just a paper. It doesn't mean anything. Yet it does. But what it is really is when we recognize we're actually looking through it, then it is that we're looking at it. And perhaps we've been looking at it, and more have we been having to, I don't want to say force, but I'm just going to say that for now, perhaps this era has forced us to recognize it's, what does it mean to look through it? And maybe that's what we've always been, but have blinded ourselves by looking at.
I think that I hope people don't miss that message, because we're 1 month away from getting out of 2020, right? Mm-hmm. And everyone's looking at 2020 as this like horrible year, and it was,
But even then, it was just like, even if it was another year, like we would just call it that year.
Exactly. So I hope that people don't look at it as 2020, something that you visually see, but look through it and actually see it for what it was. Yes, it was a hard year, but it was a year to build resiliency. It was and I told you in my podcast that my year was horrible. I experienced 2 losses, and I had like kind of like a revelation moment with my fiance where I told him maybe it was our turn. We've seen bad shit happen to people for so many years. Maybe it was our turn to experience some bad shit. Doesn't make it any better, but maybe it was our turn. So that's seen through the time, I feel, other than like, I can't wait till 2020 is over. No, don't don't look at it as a visual time, as a visual calendar. What did you experience this whole year? What did you learn this whole year? What influenced you this whole year,
It makes me think about a conversation that I had with my brother. I've set this quick little, I would consider it a small poem that came to really in conversation with my brother that he thought of. And so shout out to Agustin Hernandez. And it goes like this real quick. Fate is inevitable. Accept it. Oh yeah. Move forward. So let me deliver it again, because that pause. Mm-hmm. Here it is. Fate is inevitable. Accept it. Move forward. And there is no way around it.
Mm-hmm. Sorry, I'm like biting ice now. Sorry.
Yes. Add to the chemistry. Mm-hmm. By the way, pardon me, that was a total bomb. By the way, that's what you would call a bomb, but it's all about the recovery.
Yeah, and it is. Fate is inevitable. And again, I hope people just don't lose that message. That, it's this year was going to happen no matter what, right? So it's just a matter of like what we learn from it.
There certainly seems to have been such intense revelations. And I think about the word, it's so easy to get tied up behind the word revelations. Oh, revelations, because of biblical references. Mm-hmm. And perhaps so, sure. And I would not consider myself familiar within those depths. But when just looking at the word revelation and just kind of pause for a real quick, revelation, it's like, what is the internet? Hasn't it played the role of revealing of essentially all that could be thought of, so it's like, it makes me think of this question, and then I thought I would ask in referencing to, if anyone has seen the documentary on Netflix, Social Dilemma, highly recommend it. Quick unpack of that. Imagine the people who crafted, created, founded, expanded social media platforms with the intention of good, and perhaps just within the free market sense, like, hey, let's generate business here, let's expand, let's keep growing the growth here. And the people who created the like button, down to that, it's not that long ago that all of this was founded. Here we are, essentially expressing concern over the climate that we have found ourselves in socially, culturally, and how apparent it's been playing the factor and facilitator and amplifier of polarity. So Social Dilemma is a great documentary. So kind of referencing from that pool of thought, in the era of social media, big tech, how would you describe how would you describe what being a social worker is like?
So social work is often looked at like, this is the title, social work. So what do? You take away kids. I have never worked for CPS before in my life, but that's just the first thing that you think of when you think of the word social work, unfortunately. So we've, as individuals and as social workers, we've had to work really hard at advocating for our work and what we do and what we're capable of doing. And now through social media, we are seeing a lot of social workers put it out there now. And that kind of influenced me to start putting it out there as well. To take more, to explore, to be able to advocate for being a social worker a lot more, and being able to put it out there. Like, I am a social worker and I'm proud of it. I'm proud that I'm able,
what it actually is.
Yes. Like, I'm proud that I'm able to work in policy. I'm proud that I'm a president of a nonprofit organization. I'm proud of being able to also be a counselor. I'm proud of also being able to help people in the community find resources that they need. I'm able and I'm capable of doing all of these things, and I'm no longer going to hide it behind the word social work that makes you think something completely different of what I do. Now I'm going to put it out there. And with social media, we're seeing that a lot more now.
Wow. And how would you say, especially with the people that you see that that benefit from the services of social work, and I guess what I'm trying to get at is the appropriate word client or case, or like the people that come your way?
Yeah.
How would you,
all of the above?
Right. Okay. How would you describe it's been playing, the whole social media, big tech and all that has been playing a factor in what you are facing as the role of counselor?
So I have two jobs. My day job is working for a nonprofit organization that works under Medicaid. That was a complete change. We went from literally going into your home, asking you what your needs are, and, trying to give them to you, to calling you over the phone and trying to figure out whether you're telling us the truth or not, and then trying to give you the services that you need. That's been a huge change. And we're still trying to process that, and how we're doing that working from home and this whole virtual
cold turkey, pretty much, right?
Yes. And it's been a huge change. Now, vice versa, I'm working my second job as a care counselor for an online therapy company. It's an online mental health company. They have like a social media page. If you go into their website, you're able to choose whatever therapist, whatever counselor you want. You go under my name and it tells you what my likes are, what I do, how I feel about mental health. And if I'm the right fit for you, then you'll choose me as a care counselor. So,
I bet there's a lot of fun for people to see what's going on with, who is Miss B, and look at this and that, and
yeah, I've had people tell me, like, I chose you because in your biography it says that you like watching reality TV, and I like watching reality TV. And I'm like, great, let's talk about reality TV for 15 minutes and then we'll talk about your
Yes.
mental health.
Hmm. It's really that link. And how would you describe that, how vital that link is?
It's incredibly, I think you were sharing with me like the I forgot his name, but like the importance of like what you put out there in social media, and it's going to be like your biggest form of like advertisement. I forgot his name that
Gary
you were
V?
saying. Yes,
Yes.
yes. So
I
like,
got introduced by to anyone who hasn't heard of Gary V. He's like a I would encapsulate. I don't think this word does it justice, but you're welcome to deep dive on your own. Gary V. You can kind of like write it off as like a like social media guru. Like he really certainly
mhm,
had the crafts of experience and thought. He's one of like the early pioneers of Twitter, Google search. Through his wine company and through expanding his wine company, he's figured out the trends and patterns of social media in especially into now TikTok and LinkedIn, all that kind of stuff. So, and that guy was turned on to me by a friend of mine who happens to be a YouTuber. My students, friends, all kinds of ages. If I were to say the name Eddie VR, they freak out. They're like, wait, what? Y'all are friends? He's about to hit, as of right now, December 9th, he's about to hit 5 million subscribers.
oh
And
wow,
yeah, so he's certainly living the celebrity life in terms of, within the space of YouTube. And it's quite remarkable. Uh, and it's so anyone looking along those lines, he shared with me that Gary Vee was certainly a very important piece to his trying to piece together the puzzle, what it means to build into that space. So Gary V, you're welcome. I highly recommend checking that content out. But that's what you're talking about, right?
yeah. So that's where you see how important it is what you put out there
Mm.
in the world. I wrote a small little mini biography about myself, and that's allowing people to view a little side of me, and that's making them choose me as their care counselor. That's great, and but it's still something that was put out there in social media and on the internet. Um, like it's the new form. It's the new way of world. I mean, I met
New
my
form, yeah.
mentor. Yeah, I met my current mentor and supervisor right now through social media. She was a licensed clinical social worker. I followed her Instagram page, and she would put out like stuff. If you ever want to become a clinical social worker, this is what you should do.
Huh.
Yeah, she would put out a lot of content
She
on
resonated because she had the content.
yeah, she had the content. So she put it out on YouTube. She would put it out on social media. She would put it out on Instagram. And then one day I just reached out to her and I was like, I really want your guidance to become a clinical social worker. And since then I've been working with her. But it all happened through social media.
Mm. So that's certainly because of the what's become a space of social media and the newfound forum, right? And I'm curious to draw a parallel of everything that we're talking about, what's become of social media, the blessings and the what the heck, just the entity of it all. Parallel between. Well, let me ask this question: what parallel through the lens of your experience being a social worker of all along the lines of the two kinds of lines of work that you've been involved in, being a social worker, do you see between your work and socially, peaceful the peaceful civil discourse, how much it seems to have been challenged, as it also seems to have become less present as of recent? How would you advocate for such peace in conversation, especially because it's such a large forum? The To discredit any view or any voice, really, for that matter, really is a formula for, and as a sort of ignition of of a sort of fire that doesn't welcome the presence of peace, what comes to mind?
Empathy. We need to practice it no matter what, no matter if the person like that we're talking to doesn't have the same beliefs and views that we do. We have to practice empathy. And so many people forget that. You're because you want to promote yourself out in social media, but you're so damn afraid about what you're going to put out there because you're afraid you're going to be judged by everybody. And then sometimes there's trolls that literally that's all they do is they sit down and see how they could break you down.
Yeah.
In social media.
Highly, even to the highest of intellect.
Yes. So, I've been thinking a lot more about the content that I put out. I've been silent a lot recently, which is nothing like me. I'm not silent at all. I'm very outspoken.
But at the same time, it shows a lot about your willingness to sort through the thoughts, or rather, I should say like this: your willingness to recognize the magnitude of scale of what the heckery that is unfolding before our eyes. The what the heckery of, I'm making up a word, look at that, of what has been, what is being revealed. So it's like, well, hold on. And I think we shared that, we touched on that on your podcast and our conversation there. And I to me, for you to say that that's nothing like me, to be silent, to me, what comes to mind is that you're actually expressing that you're willing to put a pause and let's see, there is a lot going on here. And to be silent does not mean bad. It actually means wisdom to the point of what shall be revealed along the way. Also, is that along the lines of what you're trying to say?
Yeah, I think that right now, it's funny. I had read somewhere like everybody wants to become a podcaster now, and I'm like, yeah, because I'm willing to listen, and I'm willing to listen to anything that's out there because I'm willing to learn. So
it's a space where that is held.
Yes. So I want to listen to other people's point of views. I just want to listen and I want to learn from everybody, from all sides. And not that many people like that. So sometimes I have to keep my mouth shut about that in itself. When I've never kept it a secret that my fiance has totally different beliefs than I do. And we have totally opposite political views than I do. We do not talk about politics at our home. It's like the number one rule that we have. But the one, and it did at times cause like friction in our relationship. But the one time that I heard someone say, how could you love someone like that? Just the simple fact that you said, how could you love, is enough for me to say, fuck it. I don't care what anybody else thinks. I'm going to listen to all sides, all views, because I want to learn about everybody and I want that peace in my mind. And that's important to me.
Yeah, because ultimately it allows for further clarity mutually, like a mutual witnessing of a sort of furtherance of clarity of what's going on. Because ultimately, who are we anyway when it comes to, I know what this is, and you know what, anyone who thinks this way means you're this and that. It's like, what if not? And now what? And
that's the first thing that came to mind is like, how could you tell me, how could I love? It's like, no, but that's not what I meant. I meant, how could you love someone? And I'm like, no, that's all I heard. How could I love? That's all I heard. That's all I needed to hear. So no one's going to tell me how I could love. I know how to love. I know how I'm going to perceive love. It's in here.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Wow.
Yeah.
Then would that be, can we find a little package there with this question? How can we advocate for such peace in conversation? And what comes to mind for me, and you're welcome to wrap it there, is empathy, the how can we love the other person that is making themselves vulnerable to, even as strong as they may be, is still out in the field, in the battlefield, where there's swords swinging left and right. It's like, well, no matter what protection you got, you're in the field. anything can happen. We're vulnerable. So it's like, how can I love the fact that we are out here sharing this trench together and just trying to figure things out? Would you say that just kind of came up? How would you add to that?
It's hard. I think we just need to stick true to ourselves. At the end of the day, we only have to care about the opinions of those who we really cherish, of those that are really going to have an impact on our lives, and everybody else could just go fuck themselves.
Because ultimately, the I love that. Let's that set. Let's just let that settle. Yes, because freedom of speech is a space where nothing physical is happening, and it's where the abstract realm gets to be witnessed and experienced, unlike any shoe, dog, tree could ever do. Certainly within perhaps they have their own way, right? But certainly not unlike human. And whatever the expressions may be, shall they be witnessed? And what do we do with that? Well, we have this flapping flesh thing that we call tongue that somehow transmutes ideas, that causes a sort of effect seemingly from nowhere.
People forget how strong this is. They forget how strong our words are. They forget how strong our words are and how powerful they are, but also how much they could hurt someone else.
Yeah. And and to some extent it's like fair enough that it can hurt. It just does it mean therefore raising our, is that why there is such thing as shields? I mean, why are there swords, right? Imagine if there's no shields. Well, what a bloodbath that would be. Of course it's going to cut through. But what does it mean to have shields? And perhaps it's along the lines of preparing oneself. Imagine, like, I think about what comes to mind immediately right now is I'm an elementary teacher and I see kinder through fifth, and especially the young ones, when another student says something not so nice to them, it's like they're not prepared for it. They're like, "You're not my friend." It's a shock. It's a real shock. I see their eye, and it's like the world reality as they have known it up until that moment has been shocked. It's like, what? They're not prepared. So as opposed to a high schooler who's witty and is like, who's got a strut to their walk, right? Someone tries to pull fast one on them, they're already ready. They're ready to swing right back. Either with a shield, like, oh, that doesn't bother me. You think that's gonna bother me? Look at this. He or she really thinks this is gonna bother me. Or with a sword, this came out of nowhere. All right, you didn't see this coming, right? And it's like, oh, I'm describing it in weird ways, but I guess what I'm trying to say is perhaps the tongue must be that dangerous. But at the same time, that what does it mean to raise discernment between wielding accordingly?
So my question for you is, if our tongue is the sword, what's the shield?
The mind is what comes to mind. I think so. Because, when I think back at that kid, I think of myself when I talk to that person, but they said they're not my friend. I'm like, hey, hold on. Maybe something else is going. I don't know what the situation may be like, but a session occurs. Point is, a session occurs with the kid, and essentially what happens from conversing with that kid is, if as opposed to if it never happened, what happens is, oh, okay, all right, moving on. Something happens in the mind that only that doesn't happen with the tongue, doesn't happen with their muscle, doesn't happen with a literal shield. It's in the mind. It's like a shift that it's like a this question that just is reflects in a shock when it could be received with like actually it's like this, what you thought was this, it's actually over here. It's like a realignment, a sort of answer, if you will, or a better question. So as opposed to if it never happened, they would just stay shocked. They're like, I can't. Maybe they start changing their behaviors to try to win them over, to get their attention, to be their friends, to be a little puppy, if you will, like, trying to, be a chicle with them. Chicle means bubble gum, or like a really chewed gum that's like, ugh, just how do I get this off my shoe? Like all of
Yeah.
a sudden, all these other sides of the human traits, or rather human condition, appear, and it could further condition them to be that way. Imagine if that conversation was never had, even if, especially if, who knows if there is even an order at home where there's such chaos that allows for such behaviors to continue into middle school, high school. I'm not going to go to college. I'm not going to bother trying to climb up a ladder, whatever it may be. And in the circumstances along the journey, just because of that conversation in the mind, if it was just had, what does
What's
it mean to have? Go
interesting
ahead.
is that I'm wondering if people are understanding that the virtual world is just like the real world. So
Because it affects the mind.
it affects the mind, and it will still lead us to conditioned behavior. It will still lead us to question about someone's history.
It will still lead us into thinking, wait, what? Are you serious? What?
Yes.
I guess I got to keep thinking along these lines. Maybe I need to keep clicking along these links.
Yes, yes. Well, look at it this way. There's more than two different types of personalities.
Let's play with this.
But like, okay, so let's look at the personality. For example, I joke about like I have 4 listeners on my podcast, but in reality, I don't give a fuck if I have 2 listeners. I'm still going to do a podcast. However, there's the other personality that craves the likes, craves the listeners, craves the attention. And then you start questioning, why are you craving this? Isn't that the same thing as like winning most popular? Isn't that the same thing? What you would normally witness in the real world, you're still also witnessing in the virtual world.
It shows up. There's metrics that happens to be called likes. And it also shows up in the invisible of like, who knows me? Who knows me? Who knows me? Do you know me? Hey, all that stuff.
Yeah. So the virtual world is not very different than the real world.
It's a reflection.
Uh-huh.
It's an extension. It's the great revelation captured in zeros and ones.
Yeah. And so whenever, you hear this whole like, oh, it's just social media, it's like, yeah, but right now we're living in social media. Right now, the virtual world is what we have. And considering the new normal, that is what we might have. So we still have to be considerate and empathetic in the virtual world as much as we do in the real world.
I'm wondering how much, just this is a thought that my brother and I have had shared conversations on. And I'm curious what comes to mind for you. Essentially, we're jokingly, playfully predicting that, the realm of podcasts will be realized as everyone's, what was once known as, the NBCs, all these news networks, or whatever networks, any network of media. What's the difference? Perhaps a play on words, right? Perhaps a variant to distinguish an entity, but functioning as the same medium. It's in between the mediator. I'm very curious how much we're playing with the idea that podcasting will be a realized network of medium that will be the extensions of every individual, where everyone has one, everyone has their own Truman Show essentially, and the way we communicate is from afar, like, hey, shout out to blah blah blah, kind of like what we're doing earlier.
Right.
And imagine there being responses through their own networks, and that's how discourse occurs from afar, even right here in this shared space, just as we are. And imagine, just pop it even further, just what what 2120 will look back at this in terms of, well, look at, for example, okay, I'll say it like this. I'm doing this music video for my kids, and like a Christmas asking, through scanning on YouTube, like, what clips can I find that can further amplify certain points that I'm trying to make. And I allowed myself, I got a full disclosure, I allowed myself to do a little rabbit hole of 90s home videos, and
Mm.
in Christmas, on Christmas Day, and how families were gathering. And I'm looking at this as 1993, and you feel family hanging out, the TV's on, you see the haircuts, and you see the momentum of the 90s life. And it's like, oh, home videos were just equivalent to what we see as social media today. It was just uncentralized.
Right.
Yeah, it's now centralized, where all home videos, just like I'm watching a whole other family that I don't know yet I relate to, is is being captured as we know it, just as this, like we're writing into a history book right now.
Right. And I think that I prefer, I mean, I grew up watching TV excessively, and I grew up,
Yeah,
I
me
guess,
too.
with like images of what we should be, I guess.
What's the talk of the town?
Yeah, exactly. And now that's kind of the same way as you see in social media whenever you see
Virals.
advertisements. Yeah, yeah, exactly. The influencers and all of that. But
Even
I
this,
will,
this meme, if I do this,
oh yeah.
which one is this?
Uh
He used to be a basketball player.
ah
Big guy, big guy.
um Shaquille O'Neal.
Isn't that funny? Like how much a
The
meme.
little yes.
I can't
And
even
you
do
see
it.
it everywhere.
Yeah. I totally did not do this. I was like, I don't know what that is. But even just the mere gesture of that, I did that in a room with a bunch of friends, and
They all knew what
I
you were
did that, and they
talking
were
about.
like, Shaquille O'Neal. I'm like, isn't
Yes.
that crazy? If we did that in the 90s, they're like, what the heck are you doing?
Yes,
Mhm.
exactly. Um, but I think I would rather, because now it's not so much the recording, now it's live.
Mm.
So I would rather see something live
Ah.
than back in our day when we saw something recorded, because we saw something scripted. Now we're seeing a lot more truth.
Right. Yes. Ooh. And isn't it interesting? Let me show this. Right up the alley of what you said. I had a conversation with my superintendent here in San Antonio, and so we just start. I don't know how we got into it, but we found this conversation about, kids these days can tell between what is authentic or not, and in other words, and this is just me thinking, in further conversations with other people, it's like kids nowadays can smell bullshit. They can smell it. They can discern it, and this is kind of along the lines of, I don't know where I got this from, but it was like, it's as though the internet being exposed to kids these days has function as a sort of, I want to use this word, as a sort of portal that allows for unearned wisdom.
Mm-hmm.
So they don't know, there's so much stuff that used to be locked away till you reach this age and would be revealed to your, all right, son, all right, mija.
Mm-hmm.
And is now just within, all right, look, what, it's, and so, and when we come into the classroom as an adult and say that we're not along the lines of that kind of alignment where what we say and how we speak with them specifically,
Mm-hmm.
is it authentic or is it scripted, per se? The It's reflected in how they respond.
Yeah.
Would you say? What comes to mind?
Yeah, I think that like just as much as I appreciate that now we're seeing more reality, more truth, we're also seeing more stupidity and more stupidity play out live, but then also being praised.
Yes.
And then that becoming an influence.
Yeah, even the blatant, how can we not talk about this thing? I mean, like I thought this is something that was outraging us, and now we're just totally, oh, it's nothing to see here.
Yeah. And so now with kids, because they are seeing everything and everything's accessible to them, through here, they do see past our bullshit. We're no longer in the Saved by the Bell days. We're no longer in the Full House days. And now everything is easily exposed to them through the internet, and they see no bullshit.
And that's probably the best thing for us, so that we can raise our own standards.
Right. Because if they see no bullshit, it's okay. That's fine. I respect whenever they don't see no bullshit, but then that means that we can't come with bullshit either. We need to come more honest with our children.
Perhaps that's the great exchange about our generation, being that we grew up knowing life without the internet and also growing immersed into the internet. So we're the great hybrid, and there could never be a great hybrid in such an era in human history, in my opinion, that could have ever occurred. And we are that generation. As much as it felt before this happened, it seems like there's an insignificance to our generation, to the millennial generation. Perhaps I think that's what we are.
Yeah, we're the millennial.
It's become a vital, but at the same time, because of that, I wonder if the exchange is that we grew up under a certain climate that perhaps. I'm speaking out of just speaking for myself. I'm not sure if this is a shared view. It's more of wonder. Is that something that may have weakened us? And now in such an era where there's such chaos in terms of, maturation as a culture. I wonder how much, therefore, that's the great challenge of our generation, because most especially because our kids are watching. Is that a weird thought?
Yes.
I welcome you to help me unpack that, because I'm trying to see something there, and I'm not sure if I'm seeing it.
I think, it goes back to the same thing, that we just need to come with no bullshit. But at the same time, we need to be more careful with what we do come with. Mm-hmm. We need to have boundaries also.
I think that's the thing that has always been awaiting. I think that's what I'm trying to say right there.
Yeah. Because we need to set our boundaries as well too. What's healthy for us, what's unhealthy for us, what's unhealthy for us to show like the kids these days, well, and the only, because I'm not a biological parent, I'm a step parent. But if there's like one thing that I've always told my fiance, like, we're just never going to show your kids us fighting. We're going to remove ourselves from any situation that we're at, and we're still going to fight, but we're just not going to fight in front of them, because I don't ever want to. Yeah, exactly. And it's like, oh, don't get me wrong, it's not over.
It
It's still gonna
certainly
happen.
allows an integrity through the spirit of the mind of that would not even understand what's going on. As much as even if they would see it, their
Yeah.
little hearts would try to like offer help. And what could they really
Yes.
do? All they could offer is,
Exactly.
hey, here's my heart. This is how I feel. And perhaps that's okay. It should it break out in front of them, maybe that's an appropriate feeling and occurrence to happen.
I think that we're not going to sugarcoat it. We're not happy with each other, but we're not going to fight in front of you because that's our boundary. Our fight is not your fight. You do not have to worry about this. This has nothing to do with you. But we're not going to sugarcoat it. We're not talking right now,
Yeah.
And
The
I think,
regard of it like a sacred space of their mind.
yeah, and I think that's where boundaries are important. You know, out there, it's still up to us to decide.
And
Nobody
perhaps
takes that
that's
right away from us.
and I wonder how much of that is a parallel with, bringing it into the space of bringing peace into, like, advocating for peace in conversation, especially, and just trying to see further than we can see within our bubble, right? And in civil discourse, how can we speak as though kids are watching? How can we speak in terms as though, you know, th- regarding sustaining peace within each other, no matter how far off the people may view each other, or view of what they think of the thoughts that, how far of what they view the things that the other person has may be. There it is. Pardon me, y'all. Regarding that piece sacred.
And I think that's also the advantage of our generation. With my stepkids, I kind of told them, your dad, I share more than your dad wants me to. But that's because I'm an open book. But that's my choice. I have boundaries, I do, but most of the time, like, I'll just say it how it is. I have, no reason to hide a lot of things. And I think that's the advantage of our generation, that it's like, we'll be open to a certain extent.
Yeah. Well, Miss B, I have to tell you, I respect your time. I appreciate your vibes and your mentorship along the journey of, for
Thank
myself
you.
within
We talked
poetry.
about so much.
That's
We
why.
dived into parenting. We've dived into like social media. I mean, that's why I love talking to you. It's good conversations.
The feeling is mutual, amplified, girl. And before I ask you this last question, where can we find you? Plug in your plugs, girl. Where is it that we can find more of your thoughts, your vibes, your art, your work?
So I have a Facebook page. You could find me under Ms. B. I have an Instagram. You could find me at Annette Outspoken Social Worker. And you could find my podcast in the Be Yourself podcast.
Be sure to find that, y'all. And what else? What else? You're welcome to slam them in here.
Laredo Border Slam. Laredo Border Slam is the slam community in Laredo, but we're doing virtual open mics right now every other Thursday. And so if you're not in Laredo, shout out San Antonio, you're more than welcome to join us there.
Woo! And while we're here, y'all, if you reached, especially gotten to this point, you guys are awesome. Your thoughts are welcome in the comments below. Be sure to write out a thought or reflection, or even a bullet point, that a takeaway, if you will. Also, there's a red button there. If it's not already gray, make sure you make it gray. Subscribe. You're welcome to subscribe to the conversation. And when you click that, there's a notification bell that pops up. Make that solid. And by the way, if you're liking the vibes, smash that like button, y'all. Smash it so hard that it becomes blue. It becomes blue, or whatever color it means, that lets the algorithms know that, hey, you had a good time. And I appreciate your vibes, y'all. Here's the last question, Ms. B. what comes to mind, especially from the eye of social work and from a poet and in counsel, from the spirit of counseling, right? What is it that comes to mind that perhaps may help another viewer that may find themselves in that space where, like, man, I'm very much confused with the information here and there, and I'm just like, is this normal? Is it okay? How would you speak the spirit of ease and welcoming them to not, I guess, to release themselves from any sort of attachment of that maybe even may even be rooting, anchoring such anxiety, feeding such fears and feeding such paranoia. What comes to mind?
Our mind plays a lot of tricks on us, and we will come up with stories and run with them, whether they're true or not. Sometimes we do have to check in with those that we love and ask if what we're thinking is true. Sometimes we also have to understand that even though, we were brought up with maybe specific beliefs, maybe we were brought up thinking a certain way, at the end of the day, this is your body. Nobody else is in this piece of flesh. So therefore, you are allowed to believe anything that you want to believe. You're allowed to create your own beliefs. You're allowed to create your own thoughts, your own mind. And you're allowed to think differently than other people. And if this was actually a suggestion that I give a lot of my clients, and it's a suggestion that was brought to me. That was actually that I read on Brene Brown's Daring Greatly book, and it's something that I still carry with me. I have the name of 3 individuals whose opinions I really care about, and I carry around this little piece of paper in my wallet. If any actions that I take do not affect those 3 individuals, I really don't give a fuck what anybody else thinks. And so a lot of the times we need to really remind ourselves, whose opinion do we really care about? And it can't be 5,000 people. It needs to be a ground core set of people whose opinions we really care about. And if we hear an opinion of someone that's not one of those core people, then we really shouldn't care.
You heard it, y'all. Puro good vibes, y'all.
Yes.
Que sigue los bendiciones fuerte, y'all. Let's do it. Good day.
Wait, am I doing it too?
Oh, yes, let's do it. High five. Yeah.